Hello and welcome to the MediaMag podcast, the podcast for students of film and media. I'm podcaster and Sorcerer Supreme regional runner-up, Giles Goff.
And I'm photographer and Warrantonian ambassador, Phil Coleman.
And in this podcast, we'll be taking you through some of the trickiest concepts in media and breaking them down into simple terms. So without further ado, let's get our question of the week.
Hi, this is Joe from Tupton Hall School. Dear MediaMag podcast, can you tell me what is the male gaze?
That's a great question. And we're going to attempt to tackle that in the theory drop.
Oh God.
Now, Phil, you and I are a pair of absolute lads. And by lads, I mean third wave intersectional feminists who try our best to be good allies to those who are more oppressed than us.
Yes.
And, I know that you know all there is to know about the male gaze. I know that that is definitely your jam. But listeners, rather than have us mansplain the male gaze to you, we've got someone to come along and lady-splain it to you.
Lady-splain. Big fan of that. That is wonderful.
That's honestly the best term I could use. If media teachers had a queen, she would absolutely categorically beat it. I can't tell you the amount of times her videos have saved my bacon when it comes to a particular topic, and I cannot be alone on that one.
Okay, so hi, I'm Becky, otherwise known as Mrs. Fisher from YouTube. I'm a media studies teacher at Hertwood House School in Dorking, Surrey.
Becky, it is an absolute honour to have you with us today. I'll be honest, it's a real coup. As media teachers go, you're a bit of a celebrity. I'm a little bit starstruck.
That's really embarrassing.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for asking me.
So you came to talk to us about the male gaze today, didn't you?
I did, yes.
What is the male gaze? Who came up with it? Where does it come from?
Okay, so the male gaze is a term that has been mostly brought into kind of popular culture by a lady called Laura Mulvey. Laura Mulvey is a kind of feminist film theorist. She works as a lecturer at a university in Birkbeck, I think. She basically has a whole load of writing that she's done over the course of 50 odd years, where she writes mainly about feminist film theory. And the male gaze is a term that she uses to describe how in the media a lot of women are represented through the eyes of heterosexual men. So we see them as kind of sexualized and objectified in the media, often seen in quite kind of skimpy clothes. Mm-hmm. The camera will tilt down their body or pan across their body, shots down their cleavage or near their legs or bums, that kind of thing. And we're often encouraged to see them as objects of desire.
So Mulvey comes up with this theory at some point in the 70s, is that right?
She did, yeah. 1975, she wrote a book called Visual Pleasure in Narrative Cinema. And she'd obviously kind of looked at film. She'd always been very into film. That's her specialism. And she'd looked at so many movies. And if you think of the kind of movies that were out in the 70s, it's really clear that there's obviously a lot of exploitation of women within those kind of films in that era. But, that the male gaze theory is still very relevant today.
Yeah. Definitely. So, could you think of any particular sort of examples when it comes to male gaze?
To be honest, there's so many you can look at. I had a little think, and I used quite a lot with my students in my own lessons. One of the ones that's kind of, I guess, reasonably recent, although I guess I know students are obviously a lot younger than me. Wolf of Wall Street film with Leonardo DiCaprio. You've got Margot Robbie's character in there. She plays Jordan Belfort's wife. And, she's very clearly the trophy wife. Jordan Belfort desires her, he wants her, he gets her, marries her. She walks around in very revealing clothing. And there's the very famous scene where they're on the floor of their children's bedroom and she's wearing a very short dress and stiletto heels. And she literally spreads her legs on camera in order to manipulate her husband. And they use that film shot, that screenshot in almost all the marketing materials for the film as well. So it was really promoted as being a key moment from the film.
So much of it comes down to not just how they're dressed, but where the camera's placed, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. There's often very kind of low shots where the camera is down low, looking like through legs, looking kind of angled up, so you're seeing almost up skirts. I don't know if you know the Fast and the Furious franchise.
I was just thinking the Fast and Furious are the absolute culprits for this kind of thing.
Yeah, obviously it's aimed at a primarily male target audience anyway. A lot of the characters within that franchise are highly sexualised and objectified, but I'm thinking of the Fast Five film from that franchise, and you've got Gal Gadot playing Giselle, and there's a scene where her character is trying to manipulate a man to get his fingerprints, and he's a very highly protected man, lots of bodyguards, and the male characters all fail in the mission to get close enough to him to get his fingerprints, but her character says, you know, this is a woman's job, and she strips off her clothing, so she's in just a bikini, and the camera is down really low, so it's kind of near her bum as she walks away from the camera, so it's really focusing on her backside basically, and we see it all in slow motion, so it's really emphasized to us, really objectifying her, and the whole scene is basically her flirting with this guy, and until he kind of puts his hands on her, and then she gets his fingerprints that way. But definitely aiming at a male target audience, those films.
Very much so. How would you say it's changed since the 70s?
We can definitely still see its relevance today. I mean, there's still so much sexualisation of women in the media across a whole variety of products. But I think there are some limitations to the theory, and you have to realise that in the 1970s it was a very different time period. So, you know, there was sort of this rise of feminism at the time, but there was still very much a much stronger patriarchal society than it is today. I don't want to say it's no longer patriarchal, because it is, but it was definitely a very different time, and women had far less rights back in the 1970s when Laura Mulvey was writing this. So I think now we've kind of got to look at how women in film have changed slightly. You know, there are more female directors, female producers and writers, and there are some films, you know, that are coming through with stronger female characters and less objectification. I mean, having said that, there's still only, I think in 2021, there were only 16% of films had a female director. So I think there's still a way to go, but I think you can see the difference when you watch films that are directed by women. You can actually see the difference in the way the female characters are represented.
Definitely. Becky, thank you so much for talking to us today. I cannot tell you how excited I am to be able to speak to you. And it's been a real privilege and a real honour.
No, well, thank you very much. No problem. It was nice to be asked.
Okay, Phil, that was Becky Fisher. What did you think?
I really liked to listen to her talk about this. You know, it was good to go get a perspective on this as well. Like, because sometimes, as a man, it's not always obvious when this is happening. It's something to take note of as a filmmaker, I would say, and as a student of film.
Definitely. One of the things that I should mention is that, as well as Laura Mulvey's male gaze theory, we also touched upon Lisbeth Van Zoonen's theories on objectification, which also deals with like sexism in the media industry and stuff like that. Do you know, the interesting thing is now, because of the way franchises work, we tend to see the same characters being directed by different directors. The best example I can think of is in Wonder Woman and Justice League. You've got the Amazons in Wonder Woman, and obviously they are a conceit, these idea of these godlike, powerful women, like literally Amazons. They're prepared for battle at all times, and the fight scenes in Wonder Woman and Themyscira are absolutely phenomenal. And then you see the Amazons in Themyscira, same people in Justice League, but do you notice the difference in what they're wearing?
Yeah, it definitely looks a lot more revealing, doesn't it?
It is a lot more revealing. Like in Wonder Woman, they've essentially got a leather kind of bodice thing that sort of covers them, whereas in Justice League, it's basically a bikini where you're exposing all of their midsection and all the rest of it. Now, it's been a while since I was an ancient warrior in Greece, but one of the things you're really meant to have when it comes to armour is it's really got to protect the entirety of your torso, because that's where you keep a lot of your essential organs, you know? One thing that I find frustrating is when male gaze gets to the point where it actually goes past the point of any kind of plot logic.
It doesn't make any sense, because that doesn't match what Wonder Woman wears, and she's meant to be from the same sort of, you know, from this clan of Amazonian women who are all like godlike beings, why would she wear one thing and they not wear the same thing? The answer is the male gaze.
Yeah, another interesting thing is that makes me feel uncomfortable sometimes is there is a difference between having sexist characters and a sexist film, and I think a lot of that sometimes can come down to camera angles. So did you see Once Upon a Time in Hollywood?
You know what, I've still not managed to get around to watching that yet, unfortunately.
Okay, well don't, because my goodness, that is 3 hours of my life I'm not getting back. But there's one point where one of the sort of Manson family is effectively propositioning Brad Pitt's character, played expertly by Margaret Qualley, who is one of my favourite actresses, and she's there in like a sort of swimsuit top and like sort of cut off jeans, and she's obviously clearly sexualized, and the idea is she's meant to be sort of like drawing men in and all the rest of it. That's not a problem. The problem is where Tarantino puts the camera. So she is sort of leaning over into the car and Tarantino puts the camera right by her bum. And you're like, dude.
Come on. Quentin, mate. You know
do
what
you
I mean?
have to make us all feel dirty?
You should know better.
Yeah. That's the thing. You really should know better, you know?
So Becky Fisher talks about the negative impact that the male gaze and objectification has on women. But I wanted to take a moment to look at the knock-on effect of objectification of male bodies as well.
So I'm going to show you 2 pictures, and I'm hoping you can just describe them to the audience for me. Okay?
Sure. Okay. The first one is Muscle and Fitness magazine, and it shows a rather ripped-looking Hugh Jackman as Wolverine brandishing his claws and flexing his muscles.
And now I'm sending you the next one over now.
This one is from Good Housekeeping magazine, and it's showing Hugh Jackman again, but this time he's hands on his hips. He's wearing like a very pleasant-looking jumper. He's got a nice little smile on his face, and it has things on it such as Hugh Jackman's recipe for romance, what keeps his marriage rock solid, 30-minute dinner ideas. You know, like, it's very much different from the first one, and it's quite easy to see how.
So it is massively different. You know, he's got the threatening pose, he's got the standard Wolverine hair, face is frowning, his eyes are threatening, and this photo is designed to show off his muscles, and his veins are popping out, and it's a dominator fantasy. You know, the thing about the male gaze is it sets beauty standards for women and men. You know, Natalie Dormer from, amongst other things, Game of Thrones, she had a brilliant quote where she said, "My personal experience has been to work on phenomenal jobs which the men are objectified as much as the women. Actors suffer from it too. It's a visual medium. So to a certain extent, you get judged on the way you look." So he looks incredibly muscly and powerful in this magazine that is solely aimed at men, whereas he looks kind of warm and approachable and, dare I say it, cuddly in the one aimed at women.
I was going to say, I look at that picture and I think I would actually like to give you a hug right now. You look so comforting. You look like you're going to tell me that I can achieve all my dreams if I just work really hard. You know, like, and I think I need that from Hugh Jackman.
Yeah, so one of them looks like he's about to sort of cook dinner for you, talk to you, listen to you about what's going on in your day. The other one, it's a 50-50 chance whether he might pop his claws through your face. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
If you think about it, in order to achieve this particular look that Hugh has got on the Muscle and Fitness, the Wolverine one, he'll have to have been working out for months in the run-up to this. He'll have gone on punishing diets. He'll probably have done that micro meals thing where you have like 7 small meals a day. There was one time where Liev Schreiber talks about how Hugh would have to set an alarm that would go off at 4 o'clock in the morning. He'd wake up, drink a protein shake next to his bed, and then go back to sleep. You would then see him like working out with like 20k dumbbells in each hand before each shot. All to achieve these things. He won't have had water for 24 hours to kind of shrink down the body, and then it's not sustainable in any way, shape, or form. Do you know what I mean?
That sounds miserable. You know what I mean? Like
it is miserable, and it's all about achieving a dominator desire. It's still about man's desire to be able to dominate other men, you know? Like, if we think about what happened at the Oscars, even Will Smith, one of the nicest men in showbiz, clearly suffers from this problem of having a dominator desire because he feels the need to come up and physically assault somebody for making a joke he didn't like, you know?
It's a massive problem, and you can see that kind of thing creeping into the psyche of anybody that participates in the film industry and anybody who consumes anything made by the film industry.
Absolutely. There's a great theory drop by Mark Dixon where he explains Lisbeth Van Zoon's theories on objectification, which you should definitely check out.
The male gaze and misogyny as a whole absolutely hurts us all. There is an alternative, though. The female gaze is an idea that's sort of gaining prominence. It's not an idea that's particularly attached to any one academic or writer. It's more kind of general at this point. But the female gaze is not about banning sex, desire, or fantasies, but it's about showing that those can exist without objectification. It puts men and women and everybody on equal footing. Some of the characteristics of a female gaze, there's more of an emphasis on empathy. You know, a man who is not just in touch with his feelings, but also can take the time to understand somebody else's. It promotes men who are not threatened by femininity or things associated with it. And obviously, women are shown to have more agency in female gaze films and text as a whole. These kind of things are much, much healthier. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. Just across the board, really, isn't it? Like, if we were to adhere to that kind of way of thinking and that sort of method of telling stories, thinking of like a generation that's going to be growing up with these kind of films as they come more and more into prominence with a more of a female gaze led outlook, then you would likely see probably a better rounded society just in general. Like, you know, you'd hope at least anyway.
Well, here's hoping, kind of the goal. Man, you know, a really good example of female gaze is Fleabag. The first article I ever wrote for MediaMag was Fleabag and the female gaze, and what Phoebe Waller-Bridge, who was my absolute hero, said was she always felt that the camera was judging her, and that part of the female gaze was that need to kind of justify everything you're doing because you're being judged for it. And obviously one of the things she did was that she objectified men in that first series. You know, they don't even get sort of proper names. It's like rat face guy or hot guy or things like that. Yeah. But when season 2 comes along, and you've got Andrew Scott playing the priest, or hot priest as he came to be known. You know, he doesn't have bulging muscles. He doesn't hit anybody. He's not overly sexual or anything. But the thing that's so compelling about him is he's able to articulate his emotions, and he really, truly sees her in a way that absolutely nobody else does.
Absolutely, yeah. And there's plenty of films out there that show that sort of like, you know, macho man kind of like character and who's objectifying women and, you know, saving the damsel in distress or whatever.
Yeah.
But you don't often see sensitive, rounded male character.
Yeah, and I think being able to show more people, more male characters who are emotionally literate, because, like, let's be honest, the biggest lie with toxic masculinity is that men don't feel their emotions, but we're all just pretending like anger isn't an emotion, you know? And that they're only allowed to have this one emotion, and it's only allowed to be anger. And I just feel like we have a duty to sort of be able to analyze our emotions and put them into words so that we can not hurt the people around us. Do you know what I mean?
No, absolutely.
Now, it is time for a new issue of Media Magazine.
Yay! Woo! Media Mag!
So, Phil, which articles were jumping out at you?
I've always been a really big fan of Spider-Man, and you can imagine my absolute unbridled kid-like joy when Spider-Man No Way Home came out.
Don't need to imagine it. I was feeling it myself.
It was everything I ever wanted and more. And it was even things I didn't know I wanted. So reading the article by Caroline Reed was an absolute pleasure. When you've got as many rights issues as Spider-Man does in film, being able to read something like that and just to kind of like muddle through how it all came to be was a really enlightening, entertaining piece of writing there from Caroline, and I just really enjoyed it because it gives you a bit of an insight into, you know, how studios communicate and how rights work, and plus as well, there's lots of pictures of Spider-Man. Can't really go wrong with pictures of Spider-Man, so especially for J. Jonah Jameson.
Yeah, do you know what? Sadly, it never even occurred to me to pitch an article about Spider-Man and the rights issues, because in my head, surely just everybody already knows about this, you know? Sure, like, I've been thinking about Spider-Man and rights issues for the past 20 years, so it seemed to me like such an obvious thing.
To have it all compiled and presented to you, it just makes so much sense, and I think Caroline's done a really good job of that.
Absolutely. The one that jumped out to me was the article on Enola Holmes by James Rose. Have you watched that yet, Enola Holmes?
I actually have watched Enola Holmes, yeah. I did like it, and I did think it was a little bit cheesy in some parts, but as a story idea. But I think just as a piece of entertaining cinema, I quite enjoyed it.
Well, let's sincerely hope that they get it better for Enola Holmes 2, which is already wrapped filming. I loved it because obviously you've got Sherlock Holmes for a young adult audience, and I feel like they absolutely smashed that. James Rose was talking about the postmodern aspect to it, and obviously postmodernism, catnip to me, and he was pointing out the hyper-conscious aspect of it as a text, how that she's always talking to the audience and how she's breaking the fourth wall. Made several comparisons to Deadpool, which I thought was a nice point. There was a nice bit in the article where it goes, postmodernism is a broad and potentially confusing area of media studies, and a simple definition is not always readily available. Though Giles Goff does a good job in Theory Drop Postmodernism in MM66 and in the MediaMag podcast, what is postmodernism? So it was quite nice to pick an article and like, oh, there's me. So that was great.
Oh, they know me over there. You know?
What other articles did you find?
So I really enjoyed the article Monsters Real and Imagined by Luca Veronese, or Veronese. I'm not sure which pronunciation that is there. Mainly focusing on Pan's Labyrinth and how monsters can be an allegory for things that we fear, that we can imagine, sort of like, you know, feelings, emotions, events that are happening that are triggering or are quite traumatic. Mm-hmm. Lots of comparisons to Franco's Spain and his sort of like fascist grip over Spain as well.
Yeah.
Lots of comparisons to sort of like the pitfalls and trials of coming of age as well. I just really liked it. It's something that I'd never considered when it came to Pan's Labyrinth by Guillermo del Toro. Absolutely excellent, I thought. I really enjoyed that article.
Yeah, definitely. The one that jumped out to me was the Matrix Resurrections article by Lawrence Russell. Now, I've still got some feelings about the Matrix Resurrections, which we won't go into here because nobody has time for all the screaming and crying. Now, obviously, we here at MediaMag Podcast believe in death of the author, being able to take multiple interpretations from any one text. Yeah. But the far right are an example of why we can't have nice things. Lawrence Russell tells us in detail about how the manosphere that's developed on Reddit and how they've managed to take something as simple as the red pill and completely subvert the meaning to mean like a cult-like view of right-wing fundamentalism. And it's just absolutely heartbreaking because obviously one of the ways to read The Matrix is as a trans allegory. And Russell points out from an interview with Lana Wachowski how during her transition, the pills that they had to take, the estrogen pills, were actually red. You know, so it's been a trans allegory all along, and men's rights groups have absolutely completely subverted that and messed with it.
Men's rights, but anyway, you know,
yeah. If you want to check out Media Magazine now, get it from your college library. And if your college or school is not a subscriber to Media Magazine, then have a sharp word with your media tutors and we will say no more about it. Oh, it's also worth mentioning, if your school signs up for a web subscription, that will give you and your classmates a login that you can use to access a whole host of articles from the comfort of your own homes. Now, it is time for 2-minute terminology time.
2-minute terminology time.
Our question this week comes from Saran.
Hi, this is Saran from Tupton Hall School, and I would like to know what mise-en-scene is.
So, Phil, 2 minutes on mise-en-scène. Are you ready?
I was not born ready, but I am ready for this.
Okay, 2 minutes. Off you go.
Mise-en-scène, which means placing on stage in French, is the stage design and arrangement of actors in scenes for a theatre or film production. It has been called film criticism's grand undefined term due to its all-encompassing nature. The term is used to describe all the elements that make up a camera shot and a scene in general when it comes to film. Mise-en-scène is used to help express a film's vision by generating a sense of time and space, as well as setting and mood, and sometimes suggesting a character's state of mind. To break this down a little, it's important to note that there are several elements to make up the mise-en-scène of a shot. It's not just about how all the actors and props fit into a set. A mid-shot at a low angle, for example, may likely display an actor as being tall and imposing, whereas the same shot from a high angle can have the opposite effect, making our actor seem small. Similarly, lighting can have a dramatic effect on the tone and mood of a scene. For example, a brightly lit alleyway with two people talking in it may seem more positive and airy, like a comedy film, than a dimly lit, low-key lighting setup used mostly by mystery, horror, or thriller films. Other elements to consider include set design, space between actors, shot composition, costume, makeup, the lenses or stock that you choose to shoot on, right down to the actor's performance. All these elements are what mise-en-scène as a term is used to describe. Timothy Corrigan, professor of English at the University of Pennsylvania, has criticised mise-en-scène for its focus on the theatrical or dramatic design aspects rather than the plot itself. The idea being that concentrating overly on mise-en-scène of a shot can lead to a film being more style over substance if attention is put too much onto the aesthetics. But whatever the opinion of students, critics and scholars are, the term is still invaluable to filmmakers, as having mise-en-scène in the back of your mind whilst writing, shooting and editing can lead to some great creative decisions and overall improve the end quality of any film.
Smashed it. Awesome. Thank you very much, ladies and gents. If you want more Giles and Phil content, you can check out the Good and Film podcast. Make sure to leave us a rating and review, and thank you so much for listening to us. I cannot tell you how much we appreciate it.
So thank you everybody for listening. Bye-bye.
Bye!
Bye!
The MediaMag podcast is hosted and created by Giles Goff and Phil Coleman. Mixing by Phil, editing by Giles. Our theme tune was composed by Rick Lee, and our logo was designed by Rebecca Scambler. Our executive producer is Claire Pollard. The MediaMag podcast is a Dask production, created for the English and Media Centre. Please rate and review, unless it's a 1-star, in which case, Longing, Rusted, 17, Daybreak, Furnace, 9, Benign, Homecoming, 1, Freight Car. Now, go write us that 5-star review, will you?